Now, our next speaker that we're privileged to have is Maria Phaltang. And Maria is a member of our Refugee Community Advisory Group, otherwise known as the G11. And Maria is from the South Sudanese community and has been in Australia for 10 years and has a background as a nurse. So Maria is going to talk to us about perception of mental health within refugee communities and what clinicians and GPs should consider and look for when working with people from a refugee background. So Maria.
My name is Maria. I think I'll just take only 5 minutes because by the time I can see we are already running behind. So I am from South Sudan. Africa is big. I can't talk on behalf of all African community, but I'll just talk on my society as South Sudanese. And again, I come from a tribe called Nuer, N-U-E-R, and that's where I'll base. I can't talk of some other tribe because everything is different in Africa. It's not like here. I was reading online last night and I realized that, South Sudan was actually among the first African country that had a mental health clinic in 1949. There was one in Khartoum, that is the capital, capital city of Sudan, but now there is South and there is North Sudan. It's now the North Sudan. But it never worked as a mental health clinic because there was no support, as the policymakers or health service don't take mental illness as a problem. It's never a priority. For example, as I said, I'm not going to talk much about what was written. I have a story that I'm going to tell you, and this is an experience that I've seen with a friend of mine who was my childhood friend. We went to high school together, we went to primary school together, and before she could finish year 12, she had an arranged marriage, and she was married off to a guy who took her to Canada. And she had her 2 children in Canada. When she had her second baby, she became unwell, and she became really, really mentally disturbed. She was admitted in the hospital for 4 months, but there was no change. There was nothing changing. And her grandmother ordered her to go back to Sudan so they could do some traditional healings, traditional medicine. And she was taken from Canada to Sudan. That was 2009. By the time my dad was sick, and I went to Sudan as well, and I met her. She did not know anything. She could not wear a cloth. She burned her hands. She put her hand in hot water. She did not feel it, so she had her fingers like this. Though she had operation on them, she was still quite like that. And one day, when I had only 3 days in Sudan, it was that day of traditional treatment that she was about to take. And I asked my mom if I could go to that because I'm a Christian. I'm not allowed to attend that service because it's like evil ceremony, because they were going to slaughter a goat and she was going to drink the blood and they would smear the blood on her. And my mom said, no, you can't go. And I said, I need to see it because I've been hearing since I was little about this treatment. Now, after I've been in Australia, I see things in a different angle. I really need to see it. And she allowed me to go. So when I go, I was sitting in the crowd. I was sitting just like this row. And they got the goat. It was a male goat, thank God, not a female goat. So they slaughtered it in front of everybody. That was the hardest thing I've ever seen because I eat meat, but I've never seen an animal being just slaughtered like this next to me. And after that, they made the girl drink the blood of the animal. and they smeared some of it on her forehead, on her chest, and her legs. And they said they will cook the first flesh of that animal, and she would be the first one to eat that, and they did that. But after I saw everything, I just went home to my mom's house. 3 days later, that girl changed. She came to me and asked for a clothes to put on, and I gave her something to put on. She recognized me and she said, "When did you come?" She asked me about her kids, but I've never seen her kids because she was in Canada. I said, "Your kids are in Canada, but I've never seen them." Why I brought that story is that in South Sudan, we don't have a mental health facility. We have a mental health problem. Most of us, including the ones in Australia who have been through so much trauma through the war and everything that's been going on and is still going on. But we don't have an understanding of mental health. It doesn't have a name. There's no name for mental health. They just call it madness, craziness, bad spirit. So when we are here, it's the same thing. You might talk to me about counseling. I don't have a word for it. I have an explanation, or I would just interpret it. Someone will talk to you. Doesn't make sense, but it's still someone will talk to you about things that happened in the past. So going back to the girl, she got healed. After a month, she asked her husband to take her back to Canada because her husband could not look after her kids, so the kids were taken to Nairobi. She did not know. She was quite unwell. And the husband told her, "The kids are in Nairobi, you can come from Sudan and visit the kids." And she was back to her normal life. After 3 months, she just went back with her kids to Canada. Now she's just like me and you, she's not sick. And that is a challenge to the Western treatment, because if I have that perception, because it also changed how I take mental health and understand it. So if you are treating someone from Sudan with some mental disorders, and they have this in the back of their mind, it contradicts. It says, this medication makes me sick, makes me gain weight, it has these side effects, but if I go home, I will just go to my traditional healer or witch doctor, because what they do is they go to someone that will see what is happening. Like what that grandma did, she went to a witch doctor who said, "Oh, your granddaughter had this problem. If she has to come home, she must come home so we can actually release her from this problem." And the problem was, this girl, when she was only 5 or 4, she was playing with her little sister that she tried to carry, and accidentally the baby dropped and died. So in their belief, in their spirit, they said these girls were not separated. So the dead person is actually haunting her. So she has to come. They have to sacrifice an animal so they could be separated. That is one part of the story. And they believe, we believe, including me, that mental health or mental problem or mental challenges comes as a curse to the family. I think we call it genetic, but it's not just like genetic. Your parent must have done something wrong. Then when you have children later, that will follow your family line, that curse. Or gods are not happy, not the real God, but too many of them. They are not happy and you get bad spirit, and that's why you're having that problem. And since we don't have any particular treatment, it is so hard for the family of the sick person, because they just have to look after them. There is no facility to fix the problem. When the witch doctor or the traditional healer does not work, does not do the job, or it's actually a mental health, because I believe if it is a mental problem, it needs to be medically fixed. It doesn't have to be traditionally healed. So if that doesn't work, the person may just die in a way that They are kept in the room. They are tired because they don't have to wander and hurt themselves and hurt others. So they will just die in a miserable way. So I think I talked about the treatment and the barriers. The barriers are just, we don't believe there is a mental health problem to be fixed as a disease. They just think it's a bad spirit. As I said, I'm not going to talk long. That brings me to when you treat a person from South Sudan, particularly if you see someone like Maria, you just have to know there is so much behind this woman. It's not just she's unwell. It is a lot to do with what they believe as mental problem, mental health or mental illness. So when I come into the doctor's room, in Australia, there is this confidentiality thing that really a big problem. If I'm sick and I'm from South Sudan, I'm not the one to talk to you, it's my actual family member. And when you just have to talk to the sick person because they might not be that sick to be looked after by another person, or they may understand the language as me, I don't need an interpreter, but if I come in as a sick person, I may need my brother or my auntie or my sister just to be there as a support person. And again, the person that's not actually sick is the person that speaks on their behalf. So that brings us support and the confidentiality. Can we negotiate and allow family members in the visiting room or treating room? That is going to my clinicians. And as I said, I'm not going to talk long. I have a very little story about myself, 2 minutes. Early this year, I was involved in a car crash that left me really depressed, because depression is one of the mental health problems. I understood that I was quite depressed. I needed someone to talk to. I need to talk to the counselor, but I could not tell my family that I'm actually depressed until when it got to the point that I needed to see someone about this. But I did it privately. I had 3-4 months counseling every Tuesday, but no one knew from my family. After 2 months, I told my auntie, and I had to just call my friend who is an Iranian, just to tell her what I was going through. Because if I told everyone that I was going through this, they would think I was mad. I would be stigmatized, stereotyped, because that's a problem. So thank you for listening to my story. And